Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit with your host, Rob Pasbani.
I'm flying solo today. No special guest because I have a lot to talk about. Memorial Day weekend has just passed, and I'm still recovering, basically, because it was a full weekend of pro wrestling. There were 3 major pro wrestling events. There was also indie events around them. There was a lot going on. We're going to talk about 2 of them. We're going to talk about WWE Night of Champions, as well as AEW Double or Nothing. I'm going to give my rundown of all the matches and my thoughts, and I have a lot of thoughts. And I want to thank you for tuning in and hanging out with me and listening to me rant and ramble on about these pro wrestling events. Of course, you could follow Squared Circle Pit on social media, on Twitter, because of a character limit. There's no E in circle, so Squared Circle without the E, Pit. But on Instagram, the E is there. Just search for Squared Circle Pit. You'll find us. And let's get through it. So Night of Champions happened this past Saturday. It was an afternoon event, which for me, I'm all about it. I like a nice afternoon matinee. In fact, being an old man, I think I passed out an hour after I finished watching it. I started a little later than it went live, actually, because I did have plans Saturday afternoon. You know, a nice little brunch, and then I came home, post-brunch pro wrestling. Why not? And the card was pretty great. The show kicked off with Seth Rollins versus AJ Styles for the newly formed World Heavyweight Championship. Talked about the World Heavyweight Championship before. I personally don't understand why we need this title. I think it's kind of weird that there's 3 world championships in WWE right now. I guess if you count the NXT championship, it would be 4. But it just seems very confusing. But that aside, once they did announce it, as I mentioned previously on the show, if you're a listener, once they announced it, it felt like Seth Rollins was the only person that could really hold it, because Roman Reigns has been really unstoppable these last 2 years, and there's only one guy really that Reigns hasn't defeated yet. And that person should be the other champion. And that person was, of course, Seth Rollins. So now it's a natural setup so that Rollins has a claim to being the best champion because Reigns never beat him. And then, of course, it could also lead to a match, maybe at Survivor Series, maybe next year at WrestleMania. But I thought the right move was making Seth Rollins the world champion here, and that's what they did. It was a great match. It was exactly what you would want out of the 2 of them. And then the right guy won, so no complaints here. This was a solid opener. There were some people online complaining that, you know, you're trying to create this credible new championship. Why is this match the opening match? It makes it look weak. I think this is a very limited view, because I feel like the opening match is one of the most important matches on the card. It sets the stage. The crowd isn't burnt out at all. So you have the crowd at their hottest possible. And so I think the opening match has kind of become a main event slot in and of itself. Beyond that, the most over person on the show is Sami Zayn. So if you were going to put Sami Zayn, if you were going to put that tag team title match before this match, the crowd would have been totally dead for this match, and it would have made the World Heavyweight Championship look even weaker as a result. This way you have a hot opening match, you have a hot main event. I thought the pacing of the show was perfect, and I really liked this match as the opener because it was great. Next is Trish Stratus versus Becky Lynch. Of course, when the women wrestle in Saudi Arabia, it's always interesting to see what their outfits are going to be, because they are not allowed to show much skin. Both of these women were in head-to-toe jumpsuits, but still made it work. They made it fashion. And I give Trish Stratus all the credit in the world. She's, I believe, 47 years old and hasn't really lost a step. She looked great in the ring. She's always stepped it up. I always felt like she wanted it. Like, she wanted to put on a good match. And you could see that here as well. She wanted to have a good match. Becky Lynch always wants to have a good match. She's a superstar in and of herself. And the 2 of them worked really well together. I enjoyed the match. And I do not like when you have a long competitive match and then out of nowhere just somebody interferes and the match is over. But in this instance, I do think it worked. Here's why. First of all, Zoe Stark interfered. This is an instance where Zoe Stark is actually gaining something by interfering in this feud because nobody really knows who Zoe Stark is. I barely know who Zoe Stark is because I don't focus too much on NXT. By positioning her right next to Trish Stratus, and as Trish Stratus is heavy, you're instantly giving her credibility. And Trish Stratus needs someone to be around every week because she's not going to be. She's a celebrity. She's a Hall of Famer. She's only got limited dates. So, and it helps because Trish Stratus is only going to be around for another few months. Zoe Stark is getting a rub from being associated with Trish Stratus. So I'm all for this. I think Zoe and Becky Lynch are going to have great matches this summer. And I hear that all of this is going to go throughout the whole summer because the plan is Trish versus Becky at SummerSlam. And SummerSlam, I believe, it's only 2 pay-per-views away. It's Money in the Bank and then SummerSlam. So I'm assuming next month Becky is facing Zoe, and Trish gets a little month off, and then she comes back around for the big SummerSlam blow-off, which I'm totally cool with. I thought this was a really, really fun match. And this is working for me. We had the Intercontinental Championship match with Gunther taking on Mustafa Ali. And this was a great moment for the crowd. I thought Mustafa looked phenomenal. I love that he's wearing, Arab garb. He's representing, and people were into it. Also, the crowd here, I want to mention, were great. The last few shows, they figured out that, we should actually put fans in the front rows, and it really changes the vibe. Also, I think now WWE is broadcast weekly in Saudi Arabia, so it's much easier for the fans to keep up with all the stories. They knew exactly what was going on. They wanted to be a hot WWE crowd, and it worked very well in this match. Gunther is phenomenal. Gunther was doing a Gunther match. He was doing the match that he always does, and it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like there was a moment when the audience thought that maybe we're going to get a title change here. I personally, not to sound like a smart, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that Gunther was retaining, and so there wasn't really a moment where I thought that it would be possible that he would lose. But I thought they set the match up very, 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 very well to how it could look like Gunther is losing to Ali. But of course, Ali makes one mistake. Gunther does the powerbomb, and then he wins, and the crowd is very upset. But I thought this was really good. I thought this was exactly what it needed to be. Gunther is on quite a run. I think he's on pace to be the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time, and I'm totally okay with that. Unless they plan to give him the world title, I think it's cool that he has his own little corner of the WWE. That's his little universe where people come to play in his sandbox, and he gets to chop the crap out of them and then send them on their way. I think that's much better than him being lost in the main event shuffle and just, losing to top guys. I don't think he really needs to do that. I think they've done a really good job of making him a really intimidating force and setting him up as a future opponent for, Seth Rollins, maybe. And I think Gunther is just awesome, and I could watch him wrestle anytime. I don't think there's been a bad Gunther match yet. He even had a killer match with Braun Strowman a few months ago, so that's something. Moving on, then we had Asuka against Bianca Belair for the Raw Women's Championship. I am still very confused why they traded the Raw Women's Championship to SmackDown and the SmackDown Women's Championship to Raw. Doesn't look like they're going to be doing the flip, so the Raw Women's Championship is on SmackDown for, I guess, the next year until they have another draft. And Asuka and Bianca have been feuding for a while. Bianca also has been, I believe she has a record of a long reign here as well. So I feel like her time was coming up. And this feud with Asuka is basically, it's just heating up because Asuka's in her evil clown mode. I thought Asuka both of these women looked incredible here. I love their outfits. And the crowd was reacting to it. I think Asuka is such a great villain for the women's division. She's so much more useful as this unstoppable monster heel, and it's so believable because she, much like Gunther, wrestles like nobody else on the women's division, and she's stiff and she's tough. And I love that they give her this mist superpower now, and she's using it to her full advantage because there was a very creative finish. Earlier in the match, Asuka tried to use the mist. Bianca blocked it. So this time, Asuka put mist on her fingers and then let Bianca pick her up to set her up for Bianca's finisher, the KOD. And then Asuka took her fingers and rubbed them in Bianca's face. And I thought that was brilliant. That was a brilliant finish. Afterwards, Asuka gave her 2 giant kicks, knocked her out. Bianca lost. That was a great way to get the title belt off of Bianca and not make her look inferior. Bianca didn't really lose anything by losing the match. She got cheated. And Asuka, even though she used cheating, she still has the aura of being tough. It's just she can't really beat Bianca unless she resorts to these underhanded tactics. So I was for that. I thought that was a really, really cool finish. Then we had Rhea Ripley versus Natalya. And it was at this point in the show where I was kind of like, all right, like, we need to get this moving. This match had the least setup of all the matches on the card. I feel like I haven't really even noticed them interacting in storyline. But to be fair, I don't keep up with Raw as much as I do with SmackDown. So I wasn't too hot on this match, but I didn't have to wait long because this was an absolute squash. Dominic came out with Rhea Ripley. I'm loving Dominic and Rhea. And he distracted Natalya just enough for Rhea to attack Natalya from behind, quickly give Natalya her finisher, the ripcord, I believe. And that was it. It was over. And the post-show celebration made the whole match worth it. Dominic leapt into Rhea Ripley's arms, Rhea Ripley hugging him, and Dominic is just celebrating with her, and they're laughing at Natty. And I love the dynamic between Rhea and Dominic. Both of them play it so well, and I feel they're doing such a great job of elevating each other by being in these roles. And Dominic is maybe the most hated heel in WWE right now. And I think part of it is because he's with Rhea Ripley, and people in the crowd believe he doesn't deserve to be with Rhea Ripley, you know. Then we had a match that I was very curious how they would go about it, and I'm not quite sure I like the choices they made here. It's Brock Lesnar against Cody Rhodes, and this match was billed as it was going to be a fight. And I thought it was going to be a street fight. It wasn't a street fight, which for the best. And then last week on Raw, before the pay-per-view, Brock Lesnar in storyline broke Cody Rhodes' arm, which makes you think, well, how is Cody Rhodes going to wrestle with a broken arm? He had a whole backstage thing with Triple H where he's trying to be brave and saying, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to let the doctor check me out because I want to fight. And Triple H was like, all right, it's cool. And then on Saturday, they say that a doctor checked him out and said that he has a fractured forearm or something like that, and that he had to wear a titanium cast. So which one is it? So he's wearing this titanium cast, and he's in the match, and then he could use the titanium cast. He started using it as a weapon, which I thought was fun, but also didn't make sense because this isn't a no DQ match. So theoretically, he should be disqualified because he shouldn't be using the weapon in the match. But okay, let's forget about all that. The finish, though, did not work for me. So he has this broken arm. Brock Lesnar's puts his finisher, his submission, his arm submission on Cody Rhodes. And we're supposed to think, oh, Cody's so tough. He's not going to submit. The Kimura is on him. How is he going to get out of the Kimura? And then Cody Rhodes passes out from pain. And that's the match. I don't think there's ever been a recorded history of anybody passing out from an arm lock. You can pass out from a choke. You can pass out from bleeding too much, but not from pain from an arm lock or a leg lock. So very questionable finish. I understand. It's pro wrestling. Even the camera shake a little. I understand. But I thought they could have done that better. Either way, Brock gets the win. Fine. Feud continues. I personally think that Cody should move on and he should be in the Money in the Bank. He could win the Money in the Bank, and that could be how he eventually gets back to Roman Reigns and tries to win the title. Then the match I was very much looking forward to. The main event of the show. Easily the biggest storyline in WWE for the last over a year. The Tag Team Championship match, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn against Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa. And it's funny because Night of Champions, this was Roman Reigns' 1,000th day as world champion. It landed exactly on the day of a pay-per-view, and yet they thought it would be a better idea for him not to defend the title, but be in this tag title match. Okay. I mean, the match was great. Sami Zayn was incredible. I was blown away at how much Zayn had the crowd in the palm of his hand. He came out in traditional Arab garb. He had just went on a voyage to Mecca the day before, so he wore the robe there with the 2 title belts wrapped around his waist. It was so awesome. He was so over. The crowd loved him. And if they couldn't even love him anymore, after Paul Heyman made his introductions for Roman and Solo, Sami took the mic and spoke to the crowd in Arabic, introducing himself and Kevin Owens. The crowd was 100% behind the two of them, and they had a great match. These 4 guys, they know how to wrestle each other. They've been working on house shows. They're pros. And Solo Sikoa, I give him all the credit in the world. He has been thrust into this main event scene with only a few years of experience, and he looks like he belongs. At no point does he stand out negatively at all. He looks great in there. And the way the match ends, I thought it was a brilliant continuation of the Bloodline story, which I feel, it's very much past its peak at this point. The peak was easily what happened at Royal Rumble and Elimination Chamber when Sami left the group. Ever since then, it's kind of just been idling, I feel. Still good, not bad, but feeling a little repetitive and like there's not enough advancement in the story. Finally, we did get advancement here because the last few weeks, Roman has been on the Usos' case. And so he said he was going to win the titles, and the Usos come out to help Roman and Solo. And in a moment of madness, accidentally both super kicked Solo. Roman sees this. He starts yelling at them, telling them to leave the ring. And Jimmy has enough. Jimmy decides to super kick Roman. And he's telling his brother, like, I'm your brother. Like, this, you should have done this a long time ago. Very dramatic. Great. Great stuff. Although the one thing that kind of bummed me out is Roman didn't take the pinfall here. Instead, it was Solo that took the pinfall. I thought it would have been much cooler if they cost Roman the match, cost Roman the pin, and we at least got Sami with a visual pinfall victory on Roman Reigns. A slight nitpick, because otherwise I thought the segment was great. I am very much looking forward to SmackDown on Friday, and I'm loving seeing where this is going. Are we going to get Roman and Solo versus the Usos? Are we going to get Roman defending his title against Jimmy Uso? There's still a good 3 or 4 or even a year of storyline, 3 or 4 months or a year of storylines still able to unfold from this, and I'm excited. Overall, I thought it was a solid pay-per-view. It did not really drag. At the point where I feared it would drag, they rushed right through the match. So this was fun. This was you got what you wanted here. Like you had expectations. The expectations were met, slightly exceeded. The show was worth watching just to see the crowd reaction to Sami Zayn. And then the next day, AEW had to follow it up with Double or Nothing out of Las Vegas. And I want to preface this by saying I'm a huge AEW fan. I love that AEW exists. I am rooting for AEW. I think the professional wrestling world is much better with more promotions, more places for people to work. And I want AEW to be successful. And with that said, I've watched every AEW pay-per-view since the inception, and this may be my least favorite AEW pay-per-view of all time. And I'm not saying this with any sort of agenda, I'm saying this as an AEW fan, as somebody that wants to love AEW. I felt the build-up was very questionable for the show. I feel they announced the matches way too late. Some of these matches I'm not sure I really cared about, and some of them didn't quite deliver. And in general, I felt there was too many gimmicks, not enough professional wrestling, not enough one-on-one matches without, weapons or some sort of interference or gimmick. But I will get to it. Let's get through the card, and I'll explain myself better. And if you like the pay-per-view, I'm very happy for you. I don't want to take away from your enjoyment. I am just saying this was my reaction to the show as I was watching it as a super fan. The show started with the buy-in. Love RJ City on the buy-in. He's a hilarious interviewer. In general, I think they're getting their format down for the buy-in, and it's a fun kind of pre-party for the show. Now, they've typically just been doing one match on the buy-in, which I think is a good idea as opposed to just doing a full hour. It doesn't burn out the crowd. The match was Hook and the Hardy Boys against Ethan Page and Austin and Colton Gunn. And if the Hardys and Hook won, Ethan Page would then his contract would be owned by Matt Hardy. This whole feud has been very confusing, a very preliminary feud. Definitely feels like it should be on the buy-in. I give him that credit. Can't say I'm too engaged in the feud, but the match was fine. Jeff Hardy apparently injured himself. He accidentally twisted his ankle and botched a move or two. I'm not sure. Like, maybe it's time for Jeff Hardy to really retire. You know, like, why does he need to be doing this? Like save your body. You know, don't hurt yourself just to be out there. But it's not my call. With that said, I thought this was fine. I'm still not really engaged in the storyline of Ethan Page and the Hardys, but this was an okay opener, and Hook is still crazy over, so that's fine with me. The main show starts with the International Championship 21-man Blackjack Battle Royal, and everyone is in this. Penta's in this. Phoenix, Bandito, Commander, the four luchador, Swerve Strickland, Brian Cage, Keith Lee, Dustin Rhodes. There's honestly way too many people in this that I felt Ricky Starks, Jay White, Juice Robinson, Butcher Blade. I felt like some of the guys in this were above this, you know, like Ricky Starks and Jay White shouldn't be in battle royals. I don't know. I'm not sure I like the format of this. It was a little hard to follow in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the match when there were still 21 men in the ring. Once they started clearing it out, it got a little better. Even though it was hard to follow, there were bright spots in the early few minutes when Commander got to do his run on the ropes, when the Lucha Brothers and Bandito and Commander all like teamed up and allowed Bandito to do his big suplex as the rest of them attacked everyone else. I thought that was a cool moment. But in general, there was just too much going on until everything got down to about like 6 people, and then it got really, really good. I have to say, I think AEW has done an incredible job with Big Bill. I think Big Bill is great now. I wasn't a fan of him that much in WWE, but I think he's improved greatly. I love Jay White. I think Jay White has totally been underused in AEW. He should be in the main event picture. He should be feuding with Orange Cassidy. I guess he is feuding with Ricky Starks. Now it looks like him and Juice might be feuding with FTR after this, after what happened in the post match of this, which that's fine with me. I think they need to be doing more with Jay White. Juice Robinson is great as well, but Jay White is on another level for me. And this guy is a former IWGP World Champion. This is a main event talent. He needs to be heavily, heavily featured. Once it got down to Swerve and Orange Cassidy, I thought it was so good. It was the complete opposite of the first 10 minutes of the match. It was focused. It was great. The crowd was super into it. There was high drama, and I loved how the match ended with just a very simple kick of the arm. And I thought the ending made up for the first 10 minutes, but again, I thought this was an average start. I'm not going to say it's bad. I'll say it's a 3-star match. Then we had the unsanctioned match with Adam Cole and Chris Jericho. And Sabu was there as an enforcer or just to be in Adam Cole's corner. It wasn't quite clear. There was mixed messaging with the graphics and the announcers, but all I know is within 10 seconds, Sabu jumped through a table and then had a chair duel with Chris Jericho, and then that was it. And him and Daniel Garcia fought to the back. I thought, I liked how they built up this feud. I liked how they did that angle where Jericho chained Adam Cole to the ring and then had Saraya attack Britt Baker. I liked all of that. But with all of that said, I didn't think this match belonged on this card because they had a hardcore match as the main event, the Anarchy in the Arena. And I feel like they should have saved all of the weapons and everything for that match. It took away from that match. And in general, I'm not sure that Adam Cole and Chris Jericho have a natural chemistry with each other. This was a very middle of the road match. The ref stoppage at the end from Adam Cole just pounding Jericho with fists was a little confusing for the crowd. I like both of these guys. I have so much respect for both of them, but the match just didn't work for me. It was like a 2-star match for me. And it was at this point that I'm like, oh, this is weird because it's like, this is the least hyped I've been 2 matches into an AEW pay-per-view. Usually it's like, whoa, let's go. And even though Orange and Swerve was great, it was still like a middle of the road match. Then during this next match, full disclosure, this was Sunday night. There was a HBO finale for Secession. I paused the pay-per-view and I went and I watched the Secession finale for an hour and a half, which was incredible. Highly recommend the show. Then I went back and I watched the rest of the pay-per-view. The AEW World Tag Team title match, FTR versus Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. This was a very Impact Wrestling kind of match. I think all of Jeff Jarrett's matches have this Impact Wrestling feel to them, which makes sense. He founded it. He was the head booker for a while. I liked it though. It was a mess, but it was a fun mess. But again, I feel like this is another match with weapons and shenanigans and run-ins. And it's getting to feel a bit much. The whole point of AEW is like, we're not the shenanigan promotion. We're the work rate promotion. There wasn't enough work rate on the show. There wasn't enough wrestling, which I feel like I'm Jim Cornette saying that, but it just really stuck out to me. They're too far in the hardcore direction. They have to provide more of the smorgasbord again. But all things considered, I thought this was really fun when Karen Jarrett hit Aubrey Edwards, the ref, with a guitar. I was losing my mind. A lot of craziness happened, and in the end, the right team won. So this was fine. This was A-okay, and I feel if the last match wasn't a hardcore match, this would have stuck out a little more. Then we had the ladder match with Wardlow and Christian Cage, and again, I felt very much like Jim Cornette. I just kept thinking, like, why do we need this match? Why does this match have to be a ladder match? And I know why this match had to be a ladder match, because Wardlow wanted to do a ladder match. He wanted to do a crazy spot from a 20-foot ladder, doing a swanton onto Luchasaurus, but it just all seemed so unnecessary. It seemed like Wardlow was unnecessarily putting his career in danger to create spots that people are going to forget about in 2 weeks, that won't even be on a highlight reel after a while, And I feel, as I mentioned on the show last week, we got to do away with these ladder matches. The Money in the Bank, that could stay. There could be 1 or 2 ladder matches a year, but unnecessary random ladder matches, we don't need them. I think one thing I will say is I give Christian so much credit. He didn't take any real crazy ladder bumps. He made Wardlow take all the crazy bumps, and Wardlow's 25 years younger than him, so sure. But in general, I didn't think this match should have happened. Next match, Jamie Hayter versus Toni Storm. Jamie Hayter apparently had a very injured shoulder, so they worked around it with a quick match, trying to make it seem like Hayter was injured before the match. Toni Storm's the champion. I'm not going to really rate the match because they were put in a tough position, so I understand. And look, Toni Storm is champion, no complaints here. Just kind of a bummer that this is how Hayter's championship reign ended, because she was such a strong champion. And I guess what it does do, it allows the rematch for All In England, and I think that'll be a huge ovation if Jamie Hayter wins the Women's Championship in London at Wembley Stadium. Next, we have the World Trios Champion Open House Rules match. This was an open challenge. The House of Black. I'm kind of into the new vibes from the House of Black. I don't know about the lighting of the match. I think it's better now than it was the first week, but Probably better if they just didn't have it. But I love the House of Black. I love the black metal gimmick. And the Acclaimed had a great rap. They mentioned how, Buddy Murphy he's cucked to Dominic, and there was a huge reaction from the crowd. And in general, I thought this was fun. Could have been a little shorter. There was a little too much heat on the Acclaimed. I felt they could have chopped some of that off and just gotten to the finish. And Billy Gunn took the loss, which I think that was the right move. He can take the pinfall. The Acclaimed shouldn't be taking pinfall. So overall, though, I thought this was fine. Next was Jade Cargill versus Taya Valkyrie for the TBS Championship. I thought this was Jade's best match yet. Taya made her look great, and Jade sold great. This was just absolutely fun all around. And I thought it was wonderful. I was surprised. I almost thought that Taya might have won this one. When she did her finisher, I almost believed that. But then she didn't. Jade got the win. And then I was very, very surprised that they continued that open challenge gimmick. And then Chris Statlander came out. Huge ovation for Chris. And then, of course, she won. So good for Chris. They were saving the first Jade loss for Chris Statlander for 6 months. They wanted to do this 6 months ago. But then Chris got injured, and they kept the Jade Cargill storyline going just for Chris Statlander. So that shows how dedicated they are to her, I think. And it'll be interesting to see finally how the storyline progresses and where Jade goes from here, because now she can take losses. I would love to see Jade actually interact more with the people in the women's championship picture, like her and Britt Baker or Saraya or any of these other women. So it'll be interesting to see where both women go from here. We had the Four Pillars 4-way World Championship match. Personally, I have not been a fan of this build. I think this build kind of exposed that Jungle Boy and Sammy Guevara, and to some extent Darby Allin, aren't quite there on the microphone yet, and how MJF is just leagues above them on the microphone. But also I think it exposed MJF a little bit as being a bit too repetitive and kind of one note. I'm looking forward to all of these guys moving on to a different feud, because the build-up just didn't do it for me. It kind of made everyone look worse in the process. But the match itself, the body of the match, was very fun. I thought all of them had their working shoes on. They all wanted to put their best foot forward. They all worked together and delivered a very fun, unique Ring of Honor style main event match. MJF, of course, had to win this. I like that MJF once again pinned Darby Allin with a hip lock takeover, and I think this really builds up their feud for an eventual showdown many months or a year or whatever down the line, where Darby finally gets his win, and I'm sure he's going to win with the hip lock takeover. But this was fun. Then we have the Anarchy in the Arena match, Blackpool Combat Club versus the Elite. I was at Double or Nothing last year for the first Anarchy in the Arena match, and it was insane. I didn't know where to look. It was high energy. It was really, really fun. This year I was watching at home, and I have mixed feelings about this match. First of all, I thought there were some incredible stunts. The positives. I love the super kick, the exploding super kick. Kenny Omega using a garbage can lid as a Captain America shield. Just in general, the Blackpool Combat Club being vicious. Super kicking the lead singer, doing the wild thing. All that stuff was great. But I want to see, this is a pay-per-view, and I want to see a Kenny Omega singles match. Like, why isn't Kenny Omega doing singles matches? I don't want him to be in a hardcore match. Kenny Omega isn't made, like, my ideal Kenny Omega match isn't a hardcore match. My ideal Kenny Omega match is him in a singles match or a triple threat or something, but him being, the best bout machine. And same with Bryan Danielson. Same with John Moxley. I love a John Moxley hardcore situation, but Claudio Castagnoli, these are 8 guys that could have been in really killer singles matches that would have completely changed the quality of the pay-per-view. But with that said, though, they did a great job with what they had. I like that Don Callis was on commentary teasing that he was going to interfere, and certainly he did do that. And then the finish was fun, where Konosuke Takeshita comes out and he becomes the villain, and now we have this possible Kenny Omega versus Takeshita match, which that I want. But in general, like I just want to be clear. Like I'm not trying to shit on AEW. All of this is coming from a good place, as you can see with how bad I feel talking bad about him. But I just felt like there's a lot of kind of pitfalls that they're falling into that I feel that they could recover from very easily. But that's my thoughts on Night of Champions and Double or Nothing. And if you made it this far, I really appreciate you sitting here and listening to my opinions. And you've heard me talk so much. I want to know what you thought about my thoughts. Of course, you can email me, squaredcirclepit@gmail.com, or I'm on social media @RobInjection. Let me know. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back next week with a guest, a very special guest. Hopefully you can tune in. Until then, I will see you in the pit.